So today we're going to be talking about flaring. So typically when you buy your brake lines, they're already going to be pre-flared for you. Most vehicles are going to be using your double flaring system, which we have a double flare kit right here. On European vehicles, you'll see like typically the bubble flaring or the ISO type flare, which we have a kit right here. As you can see, they're the same age for both of these tools, it's just this one's used a lot more because again, it's more prevalent in all the vehicles. So it's also important to remember that these flaring styles are not interchangeable. So if you have a vehicle that has a double flaring, you cannot go ahead and just pop on a bubble flare type of brake line. It is not gonna work, it's not gonna seat properly. So one of the things that we're gonna do is first you wanna measure to see how long of a brake line it is that you need, because sometimes you can get a brake line from the store and it may not be the right size, and that's when you cut it and we have to go ahead and flare out the one side that we need. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and take our measuring tape, and measure this up. So it's about 20 inches. We need an 18-inch brake line. So in our toolkit, we actually have our tubing cutter right here. Alright, so I got my tubing cutter in place. So as you can see, there are two wheels down here on the bottom, and then we have the one cutting wheel up here. So you want to make sure you put your brake line in between the two on the bottom, where this one is going to be where you want it to get cut at. Alright, so now that I have the tubing cutter in place where I need to, I'm not going to get a good enough grip when I spin this around to cut it, so I'm just going to go ahead and go over to the Spice grip here, which I actually have already pre-fitted with these soft blocks that are going to allow me to grip our brake line without damaging it, because remember, we never want to kink or damage our brake lines. I'm going to go ahead and tighten that up, and then I just go ahead and spin this around. And then tighten once I go around. Once it feels loosened up, then I go ahead and tighten again. And you just continue this entire process until it cuts through. So go around, and as you can see, it's a lot easier now. Tighten it down. And like so. Alright, and then our tubing cutter actually has a little deburring tool right here, so we go ahead and stick that in and just kind of circle it around a little bit. So now that we have it deburred, we're going to go ahead and install our flaring tool. So now that we have our brake line cut, one of the things that we need to do is we need to find the right adapter for us to go ahead and do our flare. So as you can see, the kit comes with quite a few. On the very back of these, they have different sizes. So this is a 1/4 inch, we put it in, doesn't fit. This is our little tiny 3/16, we put it in, fits perfectly. Make sure that you guys do a very good job burring this, the edge of the brake line, so that way you can make sure this fits in nice and well. And then I already have our kit set up on over here. One of the first things you want to make sure you do is you put your brake fitting on first, because once you guys flare out the side, you won't be able to put this back on. So we have this, and again, our adapter told us that it's a 3/16. So on our kit, we have a bunch of different sizes. So we're going to find our 3/16 size. It is important that you guys are using the side that has the little concaves up first. So we go ahead and put this in our tool. And what we want to do is we want to put our adapter right next to it, and we want to adjust how tall we put our brake line in, because that's going to give us our flare. So you usually want to go to the top of your adapter, and we're going to go ahead and get that all nice and tight. So now that we have this all situated, we're going to go ahead and take a screwdriver and make sure this is nice and tight. Alright, so now that we have this situated, we're going to go ahead and take our adapter. We're going to put it down into our brake line. We're going to get this bad boy and put it on. So one thing I do want to note is you do have a little tiny divot inside the adapter. That's where the tip of your flaring cone is going to go ahead and be positioned. So make sure you sit that in first while you tighten it. You're going to go ahead and tighten this all the way down to where the adapter is sitting flush with the tool. Alright, now that it's nice and tight, we're going to go ahead and loosen this back up. And then we're going to remove our adapter. And then I don't know if we can already tell that it has a nice flare. Again, with that pressure, it's pushing the brake line into the little concave tubing that we have. And then we're just gonna go ahead and take this without the adapter, put the flaring cone into our brake line, tighten it all back up. And we're gonna tighten it down until it's nice and tight and we don't feel like it goes anymore. And make sure you're conscious, because sometimes what can end up happening is you put too much pressure and it causes the brake line to split, which obviously is not the case that we want. All right, so now that's nice and tight, we're gonna go ahead and loosen it up. And we're gonna remove our tool. And then we are going to unloosen everything. Alright, so as you can see, we got a nice double flare here. And again, we wanted to make sure we put our fitting on first, because obviously we can't go past this. And this double flare allows for a nice seal when we put this brake line into whatever component we're using, such as the caliper or wheel cylinder, and it's going to get sandwiched between this fitting and the setting part. Alright, so when we're dealing with brake lines, we can also sometimes have to bend them. That's so that way we can get it through different areas in the system. One thing you have to remember when you're doing bending brake lines is you don't want to do it with your hands or anything like that, because what can end up happening is you can damage the brake line, you can crimp it, and obviously that's not going to let brake fluid go through appropriately. So we have special tools for that. So we have our tubing bender right here. And so as you can see, they have different slots in here. So you're just going to take your brake line, find the slot that works. So in this case, we have a smaller one, so we're going to put that right there. And then you just take this and set it up like that, and then slowly you bend it. And as you can see, we get a nice bend in that. And you can do that as many times as you need to. And then right over here, you can see it also has different degrees on there, so that way if you know an exact degree that you need to bend it to, you can use that. Now sometimes you might not have this. This might not be in your toolkits for whatever reason. Don't fret, take a pipe. So again, as I mentioned, you want to make sure that you are supporting the inside as well as when you're bending it, because otherwise you're going to crimp it and damage it. So what you do is you just take your line and you slowly bend it. So as you can see, I have a slight bend in here. So regardless if you have a tubing bender or an exhaust pipe, you can still manage to get decent bends out of your brake line. Again, just make sure that you have that support on the inside, as we do here as well as here, and salt your route.